Laura and Matt had always loved walking quietly at night, particularly through the old park around their apartment. It was very serene, only with some late joggers or dog walkers by. Tonight was different. The air was heavy. Long, eerie shadows danced beneath the streetlights cast from the trees. Laura had brought an old Polaroid camera, one she found a few weeks ago in the thrift store. She had always loved vintage items, and something about the camera felt nostalgic, comforting. "Let's take a picture," Laura said with a playful smile, her fingers already working on the camera. "One to remember this night." Matt smiled but couldn't shake the unease that seemed to hang in the air. The park had always been calm at night, but tonight, it felt as though something was off, like they weren't entirely alone. They finally managed to find an empty little space in front of the old fountain, where the water dribbled into the basin with a soft gurgle. The park was deserted. A few leaves rustled through the wind. They posed together, Matt's arm embracing Laura's shoulders as she clicked the shutter. The soft whir of the camera was comforting and almost nostalgic, but the photo that came out somehow felt wrong. Laura gently shook the Polaroid. The picture began to develop slowly. First, the faint outlines of the trees appeared, then the fountain behind them, and finally their smiling faces. But there, in the far corner of the frame, was something that hadn't been there when they took the picture. A shadow. It was tall, darker than the night surrounding them, and seemed to stretch unnaturally behind them. The form was vaguely human, but it was distorted, as though it were being pulled by some unseen force. The shadow wasn't just in the background. It was too close to them, hovering just beyond their shoulders. "Did you see that?" Laura's voice was a whisper, her heart racing. Matt furrowed his brow and took the photograph from her, holding it up to the dim light. "It's probably just some trick of the camera," he said, though his voice didn't carry the same certainty as before. "Perhaps there is something behind the tree, like some bush or tree limb." Laura didn't believe it. Her eyes remained glued to the shadow in the picture. It was too deliberate, too unnatural. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "No, Matt, that wasn't there when we took the picture." They both stared at the Polaroid for a long moment, the unease growing heavier. Finally, Matt stuffed the photo into his pocket and said, "Let's get out of here." They leave the park, the shadowy feeling trailing after them. But it's out of their mind, just beyond the fringes of their attention. Their return to their apartment feels a little longer than usual. The air had cooled a little, the streets less crowded than they should have been. They didn't say much, both wrapped in their thoughts, but the picture, and especially the shadow, haunted both of them. When they reached the house, both went to the kitchen. Matt took out the Polaroid from inside his pocket. Laura still felt there was something not quite right about all this. "This is nuts," she muttered. "It just doesn't make any sense." Matt stood by the counter with his arms crossed. He was looking over the picture once again. "It's just a weird shadow, Laura. It's nothing." But Laura couldn't stop staring at it. The figure in the background wasn't just a shape. It looked like it was watching them, as if it had been waiting for them to turn around, to notice it. "Why is it so dark?" she whispered, leaning in closer to examine the photo. She could swear it was sucking light out of the air. The more she looked, though, the more something did not add up. "It's not just a shadow, it's something else." "Maybe it's the lighting," Matt said, trying to sound reassuring, though his voice trembled ever so slightly. "This doesn't look like a shadow," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's like it's moving." Matt stepped back. "What do you mean?" "Look," Laura said, her finger tracing the edges of the shadow. "In the first few seconds after we took the photo, the shadow wasn't there. But now, it looks like it's almost alive." A chill crept down Laura's spine. "That wasn't there when we took the photo," she said, her voice trembling. "That shadow wasn't there." Matt quickly stuffed the Polaroid back into his pocket, a sense of unease filling the room. "We're just tired. It's nothing. You're overthinking it." Yet Laura couldn't help but feel like she was being watched. As they sat there in the living room, she found herself stealing glances at the pocket where Matt had tucked the photo. It felt wrong. It felt like the shadow was still there, somehow lurking just out of sight. Late at night, Laura lay in bed with her eyes wide open. The apartment was silent as a tomb. but occasionally she thought she heard something scraping its way across the floor. She told herself it was just the old house settling, but still, that unease just gnawed at her. She finally got out of bed and went out into the hallway, where the house was silent as well. As she headed for the bedroom, she observed something lying there. The Polaroid picture that Matt had kept tucked into his pocket at the outset lay now on the floor of the room adjacent to the door. She picked up the photo with her breath caught in the throat. The shadow in the picture. It was closer. Now, it wasn't just behind them. It was reaching for them. The arms were longer, stretched unnaturally toward the edge of the frame, as if it was trying to break free. Laura dropped the picture, her hands shaking. The scraping sound, louder now, came from behind her. Slowly she turned around, her heart thumping in her chest. There was nothing there, but the air was heavy, impenetrable, with that feeling of proximity, something watching. The shadow in the photo wasn't just in the picture anymore. It was inside the room with them.